And welcome back to another Warcraft video. So, I think it's safe to say that Sylvanas is the game's most controversial character, and I also think it's safe to say that she's going to play a major role in leading us to the next expansion. Now, in the last episode of this series, we covered the War of Thorns through to the battle for Lordaeron, and in this episode, you're going to see her journey through Battle for Azeroth, what her plan actually was, and how she's likely going to lead us into the next expansion. Now, I think many were intrigued by how much more sense elements of her story made after reading A Good War in the final episode. However, after this point, well, her story hits a snag. From the beginning, Sylvanas' most effective storytelling, that took place in books and novellas, where we got her first-person account. However, from this point on, we don't, and that means that as her decision-making becomes more and more cruel, well, we don't get to see her own rationalizations for it. This does make her a more mysterious, more, well, disconnected from players, and I think a bit less believable character. Blizzard clearly had been used to writing her with transmedia narrative content as a bit of a crutch, but without that, well, you do have the strange Sylvanas of Battle for Azeroth. And this is why she seems so random and so shocking, so bad at effectively communicating with her subordinates that she really does need to check out the new, overhauled mod mic lineup from today's sponsor, Antlion Audio. Links down below. The new mod mic USB is their best yet, using new microphone capsules, a dedicated preamp, and a new ADC chipset, giving you the best quality mod mic yet. It can snap between studio quality mode and noise cancelling mode depending on your needs, and since it uses USB, it's always going to sound its best, cutting out on things like motherboard interference. Now, if you're still down for a 3.5mm connector, then don't worry, the new Mod Mic Uni has you covered, and it's even got upgraded internals over their past model. The Mod Mics are a fantastic product for anyone who wants to add a detachable microphone to their headphones. This is something that'll get you the best of both worlds in terms of quality. It will let you use your audiophile grade setup while gaming and still having excellent communications. Plus, it'll be a massive upgrade over whatever mic you're currently using, letting you communicate more clearly and effectively with your team. You can check out their site down below or go straight to Amazon with the links down below as well. A massive thank you to them for supporting us for so long on this channel, and let's get into the video. In patch 8.1, Tyrande kills one of her Valkyr. Now this is absolutely major, as we've established. It'll be a moment that just will have played directly into her fears. Now, Sylvanas also then faced off against Night Warrior Tyrande. That is something the Blizzard actually began to foreshadow in A Good War, when Sylvanas actually realizes that greater forces, those beyond the Alliance, are actually taking notice of her. Seeing this, again, no doubt will have nudged her in a more extreme direction. She then, of course, orders the assassination of Saurfang, committing her Dark Rangers to the task. Now, when actually told of Saurfang's escape by the loyal player, well, she's really not that happy at all, and she says that he will be found, and that she has special plans for Zal'Kan, which, I guess just means those plans were, cut from the expansion because they didn't seem to happen. At this point, she wants Saurfang dead. Now, this makes sense because his rebellion has not caught on, and the war between the Alliance and the Horde is clearly going to escalate, causing all the death that she wants. Now, Sylvanas also secured Derek Proudmoore's body and later broke Ashvane out of jail. She would wait until after the defeat at Dazar'alor to actually carry the Derek part of the plan forward, but as for Ashvane, well, we later would find out that she manufactured Azerite weaponry for Azshara, and this means that Ashvane was either Sylvanas' Azshara contact, or that Azshara and Sylvanas had already been in contact, and that's how the Ashvane escape is orchestrated. Now, what's important is that this all happened before Dazar'alor, and this means that the pact with Azshara was always part of Sylvanas' plan, making it pretty darn clear that she had been on her broader mission for quite some time indeed. Now, it's only after Dazar'alor going south that she decides to disrupt House Proudmoore by trying to use Derek as an assassin, so she raised him up, she planned to crush his free will and mold him into her perfect assassin. This, of course, was foiled by Bane. Now, that is a character who is really constantly underestimated. Back in A Good War, Saurfang actually realizes this. He notes that Saurfang, should not have been surprised that Bane already knew about the Ashenvale invasion plan, even though no one had told him. Once more, people underestimated Bane to their peril, but Bane wasn't exactly too subtle, as Sylvanas publicly arrested him after Bane broke out Derek. And this is really where we see a questionable decision from Sylvanas. She says that there's no more room for weakness in the Horde, and that Bane had betrayed the Horde, implicitly threatening everyone in attendance. Now, this backfired completely, as all that it did was inspire, worry and sedition amongst her subordinate leaders. You see, the thing here is that that the Horde does not have a political structure that is really compatible with dictatorial rule, because the constituent leaders of the Horde just have too much power. So Sylvanas entirely misjudged that situation, thinking that people would, just wouldn't dare to cross her. Well, either that or the whole thing is just that, yeah, she again was acting impulsively, not thinking her actions through. We don't get her internal monologue here as we did in A Good War, and that means that it's just not possible to know. And this is one of the main issues with video game Sylvanas. It's just hard to know what she's actually thinking. Now, shortly after this, we see the pact with Azshara pay off, but with a bit of a twist from N'Zoth. So her Naga, Shara's Naga, find the Black Blade and they attempt to capture powerful relics, but they are actually carrying their orders around in plain daylight, and that makes it very easy for the adventurer to get their hands on the orders and, of course, Xal'atath through the Tortollan. Now, Xal'atath misguides the, dumb as always player into bringing her to N'Zoth, where she then hands the relics over in exchange for her freedom. Now, shortly after this, the Crucible of Storms raid is completed by players, and Unat comments when he dies that the champions are worthy, and after that N'Zoth gives us the Black Blade of the Empire. Now note that he earlier said that the Black Blade would serve his will. Now, Azshara's plan, we find out, is to use the blade to kill N'Zoth after players had unleashed the Heart of Azeroth on her, right? And then in the process of doing that, they would shatter his bonds. And basically this means that Azshara had assumed that she would be able to defeat us and then kill N'Zoth. Now, N'Zoth knew that this would not happen because we passed his test in the Crucible of Storms. Now, of course, he knew that Azshara would only free him if she thought that she could then kill him, so he basically relied on us to save him. Originally, Sylvanas was to benefit from this by having the traitorous members of the Horde be killed by Azshara, and then, of course, being able to do something with the defeated N'Zoth. So it's likely that if that would have happened, that Azshara and Sylvanas probably would have ended up betraying each other. That is, of course, not how things would play out, all because we passed N'Zoth's test and we were able to defeat Azshara. And we'll get to how Nazjatar happens, but first, Sylvanas also did plan to assassinate Thrall, but this, of course, was thwarted by Saurfang. Now, it's likely from this point onwards that Sylvanas knew that Saurfang's rebellion would successfully kick off, but of course, the events of Nazjatar happened. So Sylvanas then had Nathanos use the Black Blade to lure the Alliance fleet over Nazjatar. Azshara then played her part of the plan. She used the Tide Stone to pull the ocean back, destroying the fleets. Nathanos then ran off on a special mission, and we can now assume that this mission was him giving Azshara the Black Blade. So this initially was a win for Sylvanas, with the Alliance fleet taking greater naval losses than the Horde's fleet, but of course, Sylvanas did not account for us being able to defeat Azshara. Now, had their plan have worked, then Lorthamar, Janeth, Elisra, and co., they all would have died to Azshara, along with many questionably loyal players. And then, of course, with the Alliance fleet damaged, Sylvanas would be free to continue the war. Now, shortly after Nazjatar kicked off, Lorthamar told players that Sylvanas still had the Horde people, so if he and his friends had have died, and therefore not joined the rebellion later, then Sylvanas indeed would have had the people on side, and this would have allowed her to greatly prolong the war, so that was clearly her plan. Sylvanas, though, just had too much faith in Azshara, and Azshara was defeated. Now, while the campaign in Nazjatar was taking place, the Horde rebels then broke Bane Bloodhoof out of prison. It was at this point that Lorthamar made his allegiances very clear indeed, but again, as I said, commented that the people were still with Sylvanas. Now, the breakout of Bane, that must have made it clear to Sylvanas that the rebellion was in full swing. Now, what's odd here is that while Sylvanas did anticipate the raid, she left a trap that was not strong enough to actually stop the raiding party, and that did make many people wonder if Sylvanas actually intended for them to escape. Indeed, it would seem as if she used the raid to work out exactly who was with her and who was against her, even though it may not have been a great decision, because, I mean, this is just another bit of strange decision-making, considering the plan was to just get us all killed in Nazjatar. Really, just killing Bane would have been the pragmatic move, and with so many enemies clustered together in the Orgrimmar raid, you've got to wonder why she didn't just end the lot of us. I mean, maybe she thought that Azshara would just deal with that anyway, but again, not really great decision-making there. I mean, as I said, the real point here is what Lorthamar stated, that the people were still with Sylvanas. So if she had gotten rid of us, she would have had the people and the war could have kept on going. And this is just where the expansion's writing gets really messy. Having Sylvanas' point of view throughout all of this would really help us a lot, but there's no doubt clumsy storytelling here when you take into account where Blizzard logically are here and then how quickly they wrap up that war in patch 8.2.5. Ultimately, her trap does not mean much when it's so easily broken out of, and if she did decide to let everyone go, well, That was just a dumb move. Remember, she was later annoyed, right, by how quickly the rebellion caught on. So why not end it there? It just doesn't make sense. Now, if we are to re-examine Sylvanas at this stage, well, it's pretty clear that her death plan is in full swing. She knows that the rebellion exists, but that she still has the people behind her. Now, you've got to wonder, has part of this been her plan all along, to have the rebellion happen? Well, not really, right? Her original plan was that she wanted Stormwind. Now, sure, defeating armies is fine, but it's civilians that actually matter, because remember, body count's really all that matters in feeding death for her plan. So what's happened here is she's consistently underestimated her subordinates because she views them as tools, not as people. Now, that is a leadership style that's completely different to how she actually worked with Saurfang during the initial planning of the War of Thorns. So clearly this means that the stress of losing the Valkyr, orchestrating all these grand schemes, the treason and the uncertainty, that it has taken a toll on her, that it's greatly reduced her capability to act in a rational manner. By this stage, though, not all has been lost. She still has that big cannon Azshara pointed at Storm, and she still has the Horde people. So because of that, you could be forgiven for expecting quite a lot of story, but unfortunately, rather than explore this very interesting part of Azeroth's history, Blizzard instead chose to wrap it up as quickly as possible in patch 8.2.5. So all the rebels gather, and upon arriving, Anduin comments that there are just not that many people. He tells Saurfang that he can provide enough manpower for a singular all-out assault, but they both know that if they fail, that's pretty much it. And this tells us that the Horde rebels are still relatively few in number, indicating that, again, the people are still with Sylvanas, as was established in the previous patch. Now, when the battle drew near, Saurfang decided not to follow his own advice, as was established in A Good War, where he laid out basically a plan of how he would capture Orgrimmar. Now, that he so clearly laid out how to take Orgrimmar, but actually chose not to, tells us that he always intended to end things personally, challenging Sylvanas to the Mak'gora. So basically, yes, he always knew he would die, but, well, much like Blizzard's writers, and somewhat unlike most of their players, Saurfang actually knew Sylvanas' full emotional makeup, as we covered in this series. He knew how she would act. He had seen her break in the past. He had seen her self-sabotage. He clearly knew that this is what he could use against her, and that in the process he would avert the battle and save countless lives. Sylvanas' mistakes have been numerous. Almost all of them have stemmed from her losing her composure and, again, acting impulsively, not thinking overall about the big plan. She just so obviously has a pattern of becoming emotionally overwhelmed. It's spelled out very clear in A Good War, and when that happens, she just makes calls without thinking them through. And that is how Saurfang goaded her into the Mak'gora. And as for the fight itself, well, it was kind of annoying seeing the fight take the form of a conversation that involved swords, but I guess that's just cinematic technique. Now, through the fight, Saurfang's impending demise is just so darn clear, but uncharacteristically for him, and this really does show the character development, he didn't seek victory through combat. He taunted her, he called up her failings that I imagine she is keenly aware of, but as we covered before, would never admit to externally. And again, she basically says that in her internal monologue in A Good War. Now, it was after Saurfang was able to split Shyamalan that he actually scored the hit on her. So at this point, Sylvanas was really pissed. But the cut, that changed things. What happens when Sylvanas faces mortal danger? Like, what have we seen before? Well, she becomes more raw, more emotional. Her fears of death, of that big oblivion, they all bubble up. Her insecurities. She was hit by somebody that she thought of as a brutish dunce. So that was just too much. She snapped back an insult. One meant at him, one aimed for him for maximum impact, but it failed completely. And all that she did in the process was, in front of the entire Horde, say that the Horde is nothing. Whoops, nothing like a heated gamer moment to end your reign. Now, before that, victory was assured, or at the very least extremely likely. I mean, assuming Jaina just wouldn't, teleport in with a massive ship and destroy everything as, happened in Lordaeron. But you know what the point is, right? She had the people, she had the city, she probably would have won. Overall, the outburst that ended Sylvanas' reign was completely in line with how she has acted thus far. You and I may not like the game's lore being defined by a character's emotional instability. Indeed, I think many of us may find it to be very tropey and not very interesting, but, it is what it is. Now, knowing that she just lost the Horde, she did the correct thing. She flew away. Now, once back at Windrunner Tower, she then continued to act in a rational manner towards her goal of maximal death. This is how she operates. She makes a big mistake, but then she tries to deal with it as best as she can. So she talks about the hungering darkness already being fed, about how N'Zoth is going to do the rest of the heavy lifting, and how he eventually will serve death. Now, she's probably right when she says that at Windrunner Tower, but if you examine her overall logic, I mean, it's not a situation she ideally would have wanted. What would have best served her goals would have been to have lost Orgrimmar and her title of War Chief, but in a way that was as costly as possible to both sides. Again, imagine how much more death there would have been if there actually was a full battle that would have happened there. Again, just like how she planned to lose Lordaeron in a very costly manner. You know, instead, she just stopped for a cheesy monologue and then just killed Saurfang when he was down. Well, really not the best outcome. So that's the Sylvanas Windrunner thus far in BFA. As you can see in this video series, she's acted in a consistent way for years. The big difference with Battle for Azeroth, though, is that she was a more important character and that the writers wrote her as if everyone involved with the story had read the transmedia narrative content. Without reading that content, Sylvanas seems as impulsive as she is, but it's not backed up by the knowledge of her inner thoughts and desires and how she actually thinks. You're left seeing her wild actions, hearing her slightly absurd, this was my plan all along, I'm very evil statements, but, finding it hard to take her seriously because you don't have the full context of how she thinks. So with that, what's next for her? Well, the death part of her plan is clearly being handled by N'Zoth. She is obviously going to be working to capitalize on the havoc that he's going to wreak upon the world in 8.3. So what's that actually going to mean? Well, we don't know right now, but BlizzCon's probably going to tell us. She may cash in her pact with Helya, or she may attempt to challenge Bolvar for the Frozen Throne, which of course we now know is a gateway to the Shadowlands. That was confirmed by Samdi in 8.1. So I think that much is pretty darn likely, but there's another thing here. It's also possible that she might intervene with N'Zoth, and Blizzard may have teased her ability to do this when Lorthamar questioned the type of magic that she used in patch 8.2.5, saying that he hadn't seen it before. So I don't know, maybe she leaps in the last minute during the N'Zoth cinematic and uses her new magic. Maybe she claims the soul of an old god. I mean, we know that's her goal anyway. Now, if she does manage to get N'Zoth somehow, then I can see her then trying to go to the Frozen Throne, either, having her master death by undergoing a Lich Queen-like arc, or maybe having her actually involved in us going to the Shadowlands. So there you go, that is the past, the present, and pretty much the future of Sylvanas in this 3-part series. And if you haven't seen the other 2 parts, I really do think they're worth going into. So in part 1, we fully went through her post-Warcraft 3 arc up to, basically up to Legion. And then in the second part, we really went through in depth, in detail, the War of Thorns and all of her decision making. And with all of that context, I think the events of today's episode, which is really covering the live game that we all played, I think they do make a lot more sense. But I think you can also see with the context of the first 2 episodes that a lot of her stuff didn't really seem that motivated with its in-game betrayal. And I really do hope that Blizzard would use this as a bit of a lesson just to rely on, novels and comics a little bit less when it comes to the stuff that really underpins the in-game story making sense. I think that is much of the reason why players, or at least many players, felt quite disconnected from the Battle for Azeroth storytelling. But anyway, that's it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed this series. I mean, my god, what, 80 minutes, maybe 90 minutes of Sylvanas content, a little bit wild. Anyway, cheers, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.